She sneered at the street mechanic. He fixed the prototype and unmasked her corporate sabotage. When she leveled her phone at me and sneered, "If you can't fix it, I'll have everyone laugh at you forever." I felt a spark in my chest, a mixture of cold fury and fierce resolve. That was Emily Carter standing in Liberty Motors' gleaming R&D warehouse just outside Atlanta, her lips curling as she recorded every mocking word. In a company built on innovation and inclusion, she was about to turn the world's most promising electric prototype into her personal stage of public humiliation. I'm Marcus Lee, a freelance EV technician and former National Guard vehicle specialist, and I didn't flinch. From the moment I rolled into the high-ceilinged facility on Monday morning, I sensed the tension engineers in crisp polos whispered behind their clipboards, tossing sideways glances at my worn coveralls. They saw a man without an advanced degree, a man with calloused hands, and a battered toolbox. But what they didn't see was the story etched into every scar on my knuckles. My wife's pocket watch, cracked from the accident that took her life, hung from my belt loop, an unspoken reminder that fixing what others discard can rebuild more than metal and wire. 5 days, Emily announced to the gathered crowd of employees and invited investors. Fix what our top team declared dead, or watch this mechanic's dreams crash in real time. The prototype engine, an advanced electric motor designed to boost range by 60%, had already eaten $300,000 in research funds and 3 weeks of failures until MIT-trained specialists threw up their hands in defeat. Now it was my turn. I knelt at the stainless steel workbench, my dark eyes reflecting the cold fluorescent lights, as I ran a gloved fingertip across the engine's casing. Each bolt and sensor carried the trace of deliberate sabotage microfractures hidden beneath factory paint wiring stripped with surgical precision. My heart pounded not from fear of failure, but at the injustice woven into every damaged component. Someone wanted me to fail. Emily's assistant, Chris Nguyen, had already teased out a WhatsApp channel titled Miracle Mechanic Watch, flooding it with derisive memes and GIFs that glorified my incompetence in their eyes. But as I unpacked my modest kit borrowed diagnostic tools, old patent PDFs printed at the public library, I felt an odd calm. I knew this moment was bigger than one engine or one woman's cruel delight. It was about exposing a corrupt system that thrived on keeping unlikely talent in the shadows. Without a word, I opened my wife's watch, the tiny gears whirring into a slow dance. Just as I breathed life back into those delicate springs, I planned to do the same for this engine and show who truly held the wrench of destiny. Around me, cameras rolled, employees leaned in, investors sipped their lattes, all awaiting my inevitable collapse. But as I lifted my head, I met Emily's smug gaze with a steady stare that let her know some challenges weren't about the odds. They were about what you choose to fight for. By Thursday, I documented every broken piece, every rotten bite of corporate sabotage, and prepared to reveal more than a repaired motor. But for now, the workbench was silent, save for the gentle tick of restored time. 5 days remained, and already the first pieces of their facade were crumbling. Next week they'd see exactly who the joke would be, but today I merely whispered to the engine, "Let's show them what justice sounds like." By the time I found those microfractures, I realized this wasn't just a broken motor, it was a message meant to break me. I spoke into my phone's camera, even though I knew Emily Carter's WhatsApp group had already exploded with mocking emojis and predictions of my failure. Day 2 at Liberty Motors felt like walking through a gauntlet. Engineers in perfect polos sidestepped my path as if I carried a contagion. Investors peered over their glasses waiting for the punchline, and Emily herself prowled the sidelines with that cruel half-smile. But in those tiny, almost invisible cracks beneath the paint, I saw the real enemy, a system willing to sabotage its own prototype to protect privilege. I traced the fractal pattern with my thumbnail heart pounding with risk. If I mishandled even one component, the whole motor would short out, and their laughter would echo for months. Yet every bolt I removed brought me closer to proof, and I felt my wife's cracked pocket watch against my hip, its restored tick, a reminder that broken things can be mended with patience, precision, and heart. By Wednesday evening, my small workshop, littered with patent printouts from the public library and schematics I'd downloaded for free, had become a war room. Samuel O'Connor, the veteran engineer I'd convinced to come out of retirement, stood at my side, wiping grease from his silver beard as he studied my photographs. "This is textbook insider sabotage," he murmured, eyes narrowing. 15 years ago, I saw this pattern when someone here was feeding prototypes to the competition. His words landed like a thunderclap. This wasn't a one-off. It was a campaign to silence talent that didn't fit their mold. I looked down at my gloved hand, stained by graphite and sweat, and felt a surge of righteous anger. They thought I was just a street mechanic, someone who couldn't even read their fancy diagrams yet. Here I was, unmasking a conspiracy that threatened the future of electric vehicles. That night, back in my modest apartment, my daughter Maya peeked at my laptop screen with wide eyes. "Dad, you're onto something huge," she whispered. She had already organized the evidence into spreadsheets and clips, her nimble fingers flying over the keyboard. In the dim lamplight, I watched her face, a mirror of curiosity and fear, and I knew my struggle was no longer just my own. It was a lesson for her generation about standing up to injustice. But even as I felt pride, a knot formed in my stomach. Exposing this racket could cost me everything: my reputation, this challenge, even our safety, if the saboteurs decided to strike back. I closed the laptop with a decisive snap. "We keep moving forward," I promised Maya as the watch ticked on, unfazed by our human drama. Thursday morning, Emily upped the ante. She announced a live podcast segment on tech justice, bragging about my impending defeat and challenging industry experts to chime in. She assumed the experts would side with her degree-holding team, but she didn't count on Dr. Aisha Thompson, the University of Detroit professor, tuning in. Aisha had already investigated sabotage cases for the FBI, and her curiosity was piqued by Emily's dismissive tone. When Emily laughed about my incompetence, Aisha texted me the direct link I want in. By midday, she was parked across the street from Liberty Motors, her professional camera gear in tow, ready to offer her expertise. The twist was clear. What started as a fight for personal redemption was morphing into a public reckoning of corporate corruption and racial bias. As I tightened the final connector and calibrated the motor's voltage, my breath steadied, and my resolve sharpened. Around me, the cameras rolled, the investors leaned forward, and Emily's smug expression faltered for an instant. In that heartbeat, I realized the real engine I was revving wasn't made of metal or copper coils. It was the power of truth, the force of justice, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter who refused to let arrogance win. Tomorrow we'd see who was truly underpowered, a street mechanic with a ticking watch, or a privileged elite clinging to their hollow victories. Next up, the moment that would change everything. Today, the entire auto world is watching, and you think I'm going to trip over one loose wire, I said into the live stream camera, my voice calm, but charged with every ounce of defiance I'd mustered. Friday morning at Liberty Motors felt electric. Over 100 employees, investors, and local press packed the R&D warehouse phones, raised eyes hungry for a spectacle. Emily Carter stood under the harsh fluorescence in her signature red blazer bouquet of plastic daisies, in hand smug grin plastered across her face. She had even invited local media, framing this as the ultimate lesson on knowing your limitations. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't a stunt for me. It was justice in motion. I walked in carrying my toolbox, the same battered chest I'd lugged since my National Guard days. Behind me, Dr. Aisha Thompson slipped through the crowd, her laptop bag brimming with evidence files and subpoena-ready reports. To my left, Sean O'Connor, the retired engineer, discreetly filmed with his phone. And in my pocket, tucked close to my hip, was my wife's restored pocket watch, the tiny symbol of time loss resilience and the precision required to fix what's broken. Every tick reminded me that I was seconds away from rewriting a narrative they'd been scripting for years. Emily cleared her throat and swept her gaze across the audience. Marcus Lee promised to revive an engine declared dead by MIT experts, she announced, voice dripping with condescension. Let's see how a street mechanic fares against corporate science. She paused for laughter. Instead, I saw uneasy glances, a few investors shifting in their seats. Something in the air had changed. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence I'd carried all week, or the nervous energy of people realizing this wasn't going to be a simple punchline. With a nod, I rolled the motor onto the test stand and began. My hands moved with deliberate care, reconnecting the sensors I'd meticulously rewired, reloading the firmware I'd patched in my workshop, and tightening bolts I'd treated with a custom torque schedule. Each action carried a risk: one misplaced wire, and the engine would stall, or worse, short out and spark. But I felt my wife's watch against my leg, its tick a silent cheer, as if encouraging me to press forward. Behind me, Emily's lips twitched, a flicker of uncertainty, betraying her act. Then came the moment I'd prepared for. I signaled to Aisha, who hit play on her laptop. The projection behind us flickered to life, with close-up photos of the motor's microfractured components, evidence of deliberate sabotage. Gasps rippled through the room. Emily's face paled, her daisies wilted in their plastic vase. "What is this?" she stammered. "You can't prove I cut her off. Watch closely." With a deep breath, I hit the starter switch. The motor sprang to life, humming smoother than any prototype they'd tested before. The fluorescent lights seemed to dim in awe as the engine's steady roar filled the warehouse. Around me, the crowd fell into a stunned hush. But this was only the beginning. As the motor pulsed with perfect rhythm, I glanced at Emily's trembling frame and realized exposing her sabotage was one thing, but revealing why her personal greed, her betrayal of trust, would shatter more than reputations. And tomorrow, when the press releases quoted our breaking scandal, they'd understand that power isn't granted by credentials, it's earned by integrity. For now, the engine's glow cast long shadows, and the warehouse held its breath. The real verdict was still to come. "Did you really think you could humiliate me and walk away unscathed?" I asked, my voice low, but cracking through the charged silence of the Liberty Motors warehouse. The crowd had swelled after the motor's triumphant roar. Investors, who moments ago laughed nervously at my coveralls, were now huddled in tight circles, eyes darting between Emily Carter's ashen face and the evidence projected behind me. Emily flinched under the scrutiny, clutching the plastic daisies, her red blazer stark against the muted metal walls. In that suspended heartbeat, I realized the fight had shifted. This was no longer about fixing an engine. It was about unmasking the rot at the heart of a system that valued pedigree over perseverance. Behind me, Dr. Aisha Thompson stepped forward, her calm authority filling the room. "Liberty Motors, your sabotage pattern tracks 4 years of failed prototypes, led by engineers from underrepresented backgrounds," she announced, voice unwavering. "Contracts shifted. Bonuses rerouted. And today we prove it was never about technical failure. It was prejudice dressed up in corporate policy." Gasps rippled through assembled employees. A few faces paled, others shifted uncomfortably beneath new doubt. I felt a flicker of purpose ignite in my chest. The same spark that first drove me to challenge Emily's taunt now fed my conviction that justice could topple arrogance. As murmurs rose, our CEO, Linda Martinez, strode in her steps, deliberate determination etched in every line of her expression. A Latina leader in an industry not known for diversity, she had long championed inclusion, but been overruled by boards and budgets. Now she demanded silence, and then spoke. "I will not allow Liberty Motors to be complicit in this betrayal. We will open an internal investigation, and I promise you those responsible will face consequences." Her words brought a tense relief, but I sensed her struggle. Could she wrest control from entrenched interests? Glancing at my wife's pocket watch, its restored tick as steady as my resolve, I knew the fight had only just begun. Outside the warehouse, local media vans lined the lot, their lights flickering through the windows like silent witnesses. Emily retreated to an expensive sedan, dialing for damage control. Her voice trembled as she spun a new narrative about rogue engineers and unvetted contractors. But I had already delivered the truth into hands that mattered. Aisha shared the full dossier with a reporter from the Atlanta Tech Chronicle, while Maya coordinated uploads of our documented proof to social channels that would carry our story far beyond these walls. The symbol of my wife's watch had become more than a personal talisman. It was now a metaphor for accountability every second ticking toward transparency. Yet even as I watched reputations unravel, I felt the weight of risk pressing down. Exposing corporate sabotage could invite lawsuits or worse personal attacks on my family. In the crowd, I caught Maya's eye. Her determined nod reminded me why I chose this path. It wasn't just for me or for her, it was for every overlooked mechanic, every sidelined engineer who'd been told they didn't belong. With that humbling responsibility came fear, but also an unwavering belief that integrity could outlast intimidation. As red and blue police lights pulsed at the warehouse entrance, Linda had called in law enforcement to secure our evidence. I knew we were stepping into a new battleground, legal hearings, boardrooms, headlines. But I also felt the quiet power of momentum. Once injustice is exposed, it cannot easily be undone. I tightened my grip on the pocket watch chain and whispered, "Let's make sure this clock never stops." Outside, the storm of uncertainty raged, but tomorrow we'd turn these wounds into a watershed moment for change. Ever wondered what it feels like when the very people you trusted turn on you? I asked, glancing at the line of reporters streaming live from outside Liberty Motors' loading dock. In the aftermath of our explosive reveal, the warehouse had transformed into a high-stakes crime scene. Police tape crisscrossed the doorway, evidence technicians dusted for fingerprints, and corporate attorneys slipped in and out like shadows. My hands tightened around the pocket watch my wife once carried, a reminder that every tick is a choice between silence and speaking truth. As the lead detective pocketed Emily Carter's severed wiring schematic as item 47, I realized the personal risk I'd taken: defamation countersuits, threats against my family, even potential sabotage of my home workshop. But the cost of inaction was higher. Some lies fester until they become the foundation of injustice. Inside the now empty R&D floor, the hum of that perfected motor lingered, a mechanical heartbeat that outlasted the laughter and ridicule. I watched Sean O'Connor carefully catalog the sabotaged components, his weathered fingers tracing the microfracture patterns one final time before sealing them in evidence bags. Behind us, a digital ticker displayed 1.5 orders in legal and recall costs, a silent testament to the greed that tried to sacrifice talent for bonus points. Yet as the ticker flickered, I felt something stronger than corporate bottom lines: the undeniable power of collective outrage. Maya Lee, my daughter and digital strategist, leaned over my shoulder and nodded toward her laptop screen, streaming thousands of live comments. "They tried to bury this story, Dad, but look, people are demanding change nationwide." At noon, our CEO Linda Martinez convened an emergency town hall via video call with headquarters in Detroit, Munich, and Seoul. Her voice trembled with urgency as she announced immediate suspensions for anyone implicated, the launch of an independent diversity and integrity task force, and a $10 million fund to support underrepresented engineers. When she paused, the silence on the line carried more weight than any applause. This was more than damage control. It was a company confronting its own rot. In that moment, I felt the ancient pulse of my wife's watch, steady, resolute. And I understood that true leadership often demands you stand not on credentials, but on courage. Outside, Emily Carter emerged from a black SUV flanked by her legal team, mascara streaked as if she'd been caught between tears and rage. Reporters thrust microphones forward, shouting questions about ethics, sabotage, and street-level hubris. She opened her mouth, but I had already walked past her, my pacing echoing on the polished concrete floor. In my pocket, the pocket watch ticked on a metronome for the next battle, rewriting Liberty Motors' code of conduct, building a mentorship network, and ensuring my daughter and every mechanic like me would never again be dismissed by degrees or skin color. As I passed the test stand where the engine still hummed, I reached out and closed my hand around the power cable. My heart thudded. This motor was my canvas for change, and giving it a voice was my final act of defiance against the arrogance that nearly destroyed it. Then, with Maya at my side, uploading the final chapter of our story to social media, I whispered to the motor's glowing coils, "Let's make every revolution count." But as the sun dipped behind the warehouse, casting long shadows between stalled prototypes and overturned tables, I knew there was one more enemy lurking in the wings, one twist left in this fight for justice. I never thought the fight would follow me home. I whispered into the camera, heart racing as I surveyed my own workshop's front bay window. Its glass spiderwebbed by impact, a single bolt missing from my workbench. Last night, someone tried to break in, leaving a trail of overturned tools and grease-smudged fingerprints. It was the dead of night, and I was alone with nothing but my wife's pocket watch ticking steadily against my thigh, reminding me that every second of courage carried us forward. This wasn't just retaliation. It was proof that exposing Liberty Motors' sabotage had rattled more than corporate boardrooms. It had rattled the ones who believed they were untouchable. In the pale dawn light, I slipped past the police barricade. Yes, I'd filed a report, but I trusted Maya to handle the press and entered the chaos of my once tidy workspace. Patent printouts lay drenched in oil laptops, splattered with hydraulic fluid, and the schematics I'd used to rebuild that engine lay curled and torn. I knelt gingerly, brushing my fingers over the torn edge of the paper, feeling both rage and resolve swell within me. If they thought I'd be intimidated, they'd miscalculated the power of someone defending truth. This was my domain, and I would reclaim it piece by piece. As I began sorting the wreckage, my phone buzzed an alert from a secure channel. FBI wants an update on evidence chain of custody. Dr. Aisha Thompson had already forwarded our dossier, and now federal agents were on high alert. In that moment, I felt the gravity of what we'd unleashed, a ripple effect strong enough to topple systemic bias in a multi-billion-dollar industry. Yet with that external validation came a new internal struggle. Could I remain the humble mechanic who spoke from the heart, or would I be pulled into endless legal battlegrounds that risked diluting our message? I straightened and reached for the pocket watch clasp dangling from my belt loop. The cracked crystal, now flawlessly repaired, glinted in the fluorescent glow. I opened it and watched the tiny gears spin, each tick a testament to restoration. My wife had once said that healing is never a straight line. It loops back to where it started, stronger and more intricate. This watch was my reminder that even when someone scars your world, you have the power to mend, refine, and transform it into something resilient. Suddenly, a text from Maya lit up my screen. They're hitting the forums, calling it a hoax. Need fresh proof. Good. Our story was too potent to ignore, but misinformation was the new front line. I grabbed my camera, snapped fresh photos of the sabotaged components, and captured video of serology tests on the fingerprints. Then I uploaded everything to our secure cloud, tagging it for the press and social channels. In less than 5 minutes, the files were live, and the hashtags Trasher Mechanic vs Corruption and Time for Justice began trending regionally. It felt like watching a wildfire of awareness consume the smokescreen of lies. But as momentum built, so did the stakes. My phone rang a blocked number. Before I could answer, a gruff voice snarled, "Stay out of this, Lee, or we'll make your daughter's life miserable." My chest tightened, rage and fear warring inside me. I recalled Maya's brave nod when we exposed the sabotage. Now I had to shield her from the fallout I'd unleashed. Still, backing down wasn't an option. I closed my eyes, felt the steady tick of the watch, and made a choice: we would not cower. We would stand firm for every voice relegated to the sidelines, for every heirloom scarred by tragedy and reclaimed by determination. I fired back, "You'll have to do better than threats." Hanging up, I tucked the watch into my palm and whispered, "Time is on our side." Outside, the morning sun climbed, illuminating a world bracing for the next chapter 1, where truth would keep ticking, no matter how hard they tried to silence it. The question now was, how far would they go to stop us? "Are you ready to watch me fall?" I challenged into my camera, voice steady, despite the storm brewing around me. It was the eve of the board hearing at Liberty Motors headquarters, and my inbox was overflowing with subpoenas, media requests, and a flurry of leaked corporate memos threatening to paint our evidence as unverified. But as I stood in my home workshop, the repaired prototype motor humming softly on its stand, I felt an unwavering calm anchored by the tick of my wife's pocket watch, now a talisman of truth, beating against every lie they'd hurled at me. Earlier that morning, Maya tapped away at her laptop, cross-referencing every social media post, tagged Mechanic V's corruption tracking sentiment shifts from skepticism to solidarity. Dad people are sharing petitions. She breathed, eyes shining with hope. Outside our front window, detectives had left after dusting for prints, and our attorney warned of injunctions designed to silence us. The tension was real. Any misstep, any technicality, and years of painstaking documentation could unravel. Yet in the pit of my stomach, I felt something stronger than fear, an unshakable conviction that integrity outweighs intimidation. As I packed my tools, torque wrenches, soldering iron, the scrubbed fingerprints kit, I replayed the memory of that fateful day when Emily Carter first sneered, "Fix that engine and maybe I'll notice you." Back then, her words stung like acid. Now they galvanized me. I clipped the pocket watch to my belt, its polished crystal reflecting the morning sun, and whispered, "This time I'm not asking for your approval. I'm demanding accountability." We arrived at the Liberty Motors boardroom, just as a black SUV rolled up delivering corporate counsel in sleek suits. The foyer buzzed with journalists and protesters alike, some holding signs reading "Talent has no degree" and "Stop corporate sabotage." I caught sight of Sean O'Connor and Dr. Aisha Thompson among the crowd. Their presence reminded me that this was never solely my fight. It was a collective stand against a system built to marginalize skilled hands and diverse voices. Inside the boardroom's polished mahogany table gleamed under recessed lights. Emily sat at the head, flanked by lawyers, her once confident posture now rigid. I took my seat opposite the CEO, Linda Martinez, whose expression held a blend of relief and determination. She introduced the session an independent audit of the sabotage evidence, the abusive WhatsApp chain, and the financial trail leading to Emily's covert deals with rival manufacturers. Every document, every photo of microfractures, and every damning transcript would be aired before the full board. The hearing began with familiar formalities, legal jargon disclaimers back and forth over evidentiary rules. But when Aisha presented the chain of emails showing intentional project kills, and Maya live-streamed the WhatsApp messages where Emily bragged about preserving pure talent, the room shifted. Murmurs grew until they filled every corner. I watched Emily's eyes dart toward the door, a silent plea for escape. Instead, she remained, her facade unraveling like a thread pulled too tight. Then came the twist. A surprise witness formerly hidden under a non-disclosure stepped forward. It was Marcus's predecessor, Rebecca Ellis, a brilliant engineer whose career was derailed after a prototype failure framed as incompetence. She confirmed the same sabotage pattern, exposing years of systematic bias and corporate cover-ups. The boardroom held its breath. I felt my pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the weight of vindication. We had transformed whispers of conspiracy into an undeniable chorus of truth. As the session adjourned for deliberation, I rose and faced my adversary. Emily's red blazer now looked faded under the cold glare of justice. I offered her one final glance, not with malice, but with the mercy that comes from triumph earned the hard way. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, and Linda whispered a quiet promise. "Reform starts tomorrow." But in my hand, the pocket watch ticked on, reminding me that the real reckoning was yet to unfold, and that the next chapter would be the one where Liberty Motors either woke up or was forced to rebuild entirely. Here's the real shocker: they thought my story ended in that boardroom. But it was just chapter 1. I said, voice calm, yet charged as I stood in the morning light, slipping through my new office's windows overlooking downtown Atlanta. The plaque on the door read, Marcus Lee, Director of Innovation and Integrity, Liberty Motors, a title I never chased but earned through grit sacrifice and a battered pocket watch that reminded me of time's unforgiving march. Behind me, prototypes lined the walls, each one repaired or redesigned under our new Equity Engine initiative, pairing veteran mechanics with freshly minted engineers from every background. The tension between pedigree and practical skill had once threatened to derail not only an engine, but countless careers. Now that very tension drove us toward real change. It wasn't easy. In the weeks after the hearing, I faced heated Q&A sessions, counterclaims from Emily's remaining allies, and threats veiled as concerns over corporate security. But every attempt to quiet me only amplified my voice, much like those tiny fractures in the sabotaged motor, each one invisible alone, but when viewed together, impossible to ignore. I routed every new piece of evidence through our Integrity Council chaired by Dr. Aisha Thompson, ensuring that no talent, whether they held a diploma or simply a natural gift, would ever again be dismissed as unqualified. The same watch that had measured my grief now served as a symbol of accountability. No moment, no decision would slip by unnoticed. One afternoon, Maya burst in carrying a tablet loaded with messages from mechanics across the country. "Your story inspired me to speak up at my plant," wrote one. "Thanks to your program, I'm mentoring someone who reminds me of myself," wrote another. Each note felt like a spark of revolution, a reminder that empowerment multiplies when you invest in people's potential rather than policing their limits. As I read through them, I realized that the true legacy of that harrowing week wasn't a repaired engine or fired executives. It was a shifting culture where competence has no color and perseverance trumps prejudice. Yet even as we celebrated the launch of our nationwide apprenticeship program and the first prototypes rolled off the line with record efficiency gains, I felt the steady tick of the watch in my pocket, a reminder that vigilance must be perpetual. Corruption doesn't vanish because you expose it. It mutates, seeking new shadows. So today, I continue to meet with whistleblowers, review anonymous tips, and mentor those who once thought their voices too small. With every conversation, I carry the memory of Emily Carter's mocking laugh and transform it into fuel for reform. Because in the end, the biggest mistake they made wasn't underestimating my skill. It was underestimating what happens when someone refuses to be silenced. And as I clasp the pocket watch one more time, I ask myself, what boundary are we ready to break next?